The offer must have been very tempting to Joseph, as it would have been to a lot of young men. Yet Joseph refused the request. Godly Joseph replied, "How then can I do this great wickedness and sins against God?" But the lessons to learn, the next lesson is that you may be able to withstand temptation one time. But Joseph, in this particular passage, tells us that he has been tempted day after day. The inspired record in the scripture tells us that Potiphar's wife enticed Joseph not once, but rather day by day, in verse 10. That means that she attempted to seduce him when he was weak as well as when he was strong. Isn't it? Some of you may be very strong at times, but you can be weak at certain period as well. So you can be very good. Oh, today I'm on diet, the next few days you can't take it, anything you eat. So the lessons to learn is the strongest temptations are those that occur day after day. So be careful. Young one as well, all of us. But even that, the record tells us that Joseph refused to go to live with her or even with her. But being rich and beautiful and married to an important man in the kingdom of this Potiphar's wife, of course not used to hearing the answer no. For an answer, so finally out of desperation, she ambushed Joseph one day. Two of them were alone in the house and she caught hold of him and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his clothes in her hand and ran out of the house. The word to learn here, the lesson is, how did Joseph respond? He fled. He ran away. Joseph had a choice. He could either stay and attempt to justify, telling himself, after all, it's okay, it was his doing, there's no more choice. But no, he flee. Every one of us got to know, when we are tempted, the Lord will give us strength, but you need to run away. You need to flee. And you must accept your own actions, which causes the consequences of your actions. You have to accept it. Don't say because of the doing. That's what recorded in the very beginning, when Eve took the fruit of knowledge. Then Adam said, "She gave me." This is what normally we respond. It's because of the person. But accept your own, accept the consequences of your own actions. When speaking from this passage, we learn that Joseph won the temptation, but most men would have fallen. Joseph did not. How come? How come? Brothers and sisters, I wonder how we measure up to Joseph here in this particular passage. How much that you measure up, especially when you know that no one is watching. And when you know that you wouldn't get caught. How many of us would do things that we shouldn't do? Not only talking about this, but there are other things that when you know that you want to get caught, no one knows. How many of us would do things that we shouldn't do? We must be like Joseph, learn the lessons from Joseph, that we have to think like him, that is unthinkable to sin against God. All sin is first of all sins against God. All sin will break the relationship between God and man. This is why we are separated from God. Sin separates us from God. When Eve ate the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, she sins against God. And when King David committed adultery with Bathsheba and killed her husband Uriah, he sinned against God. When we lie about our earnings, our income tax, actually we sin against God. When we cheat on our marriage partner, we sin against God. When we stay away from worship services, going somewhere, we sin against God. We sin against God in all this act, and we will break our relationship with Him. So Joseph knew that adultery was sin against Potiphar, and more importantly, a sin against God, and that's why he didn't do it. So what did he do? He fled. He ran outside, even though only with underwear. Okay? That's right. He ran away from temptations. He literally turned and ran. So after she ambushed him and he ran away, after his first approach, he refused to even be with her. Joseph fled from temptation. So Joseph kept away from temptations. So that's the reason why he is able to win over. He ran away from temptations. Young people, as you leave home for your studies, for your work or whatever, follow the example of Joseph. Flee, run away from temptations if you ever have. Okay, when you see temptations coming, turn your back and run. Because even Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 6, Matthew chapter 4, verse 10, away you Satan. We must have this kind of attitude. Okay? So of course, it's not only meant for you, but even every one of us that we should do. Run away from temptations. Flee when you face temptation and sin. Flee like Joseph, for to fall is to sin against God. And the Bible tells us the wages of sin is death in Romans chapter 6, verse 23. So if you don't want to be separated from God, you don't want to end up eternally, okay, hell, make sure you do not sin against God. Flee when the temptations come knocking. When your teammates, especially those going for further study, when teammates want you to go out for drinking, if you like drinking, okay, say no. Because after a few cups of drinking, maybe you can't control yourself anymore. And have nothing to do with it. And for girls, when a guy dates you, suggest that you go to a forbidden territory, just to say that you prove to love him, don't do it, flee, run away. Okay? When something sinful is suggested to you, get up and leave. Be like Joseph and avoid evil as well as temptations. But more importantly, Joseph rebelled is because God was with him. Joseph had the power to resist and flee the temptations that many would have fallen. The secret was because God was with him. If you to really read the text in the passage, you find that the Lord was with him. In verse 2, in verse 3, in verse 21, and verse 23. This little phrase is very important. Joseph managed to resist the very tempting situation because the Lord was with him. Joseph did not resist because he had very strong inbuilt goodness, very holy or whatever. No, not because he is a saint. He didn't resist because he was better than anyone else. Joseph resisted because God's power, God's grace was at work with him. And that's why Joseph was able to stood firm in the face of these unbelievable temptations. Reason is because the Lord was with him. So the secret to fight sin and temptation is to keep our eyes on God. If you always remember God and have His presence, the closer we are with God, our relationship with God, the more successful that we can to fight sins and temptations.